Don't you fucking dare. Hello, Champagne Nightmares. Welcome back to my channel. I'm your girl, Miss Jaye, the trash queen of glam, geek, and gore. And for today's video, we're going to be talking about horror. But not just any horror. We are going to be talking about indie horror. Now, I love big Hollywood horror CGI spectaculars as much as the rest. I think there are some fabulous movies out there. I am super excited. I haven't had a chance to see the new Candyman yet, but I am certainly on the way to do that because I love that movie. I am so excited to see what Nia DaCosta has done with it. And with Jordan Peele producing, it's going to be phenomenal. I cannot wait. But I love indie horror. So as I've been traveling around, I haven't done much traveling for the last year and a half, but a few years ago, I started going to a horror convention called Days of the Dead. And through Days of the Dead, I met a lot of really fun, motivated, interesting, quirky filmmakers. And they are making just fun indie horror that has a different perspective. It's a different sort of style. There's a lot of kind of 80s throwbacks that I think are really fun. So I wanted to tell you my top 10 indie horror films for you to check out. So if you're excited to find out more about these films and what I love about them, then stick around because we're getting into it right now. Now, a lot of these films I have shown at Miss Jay's Friday Night Frights or other movie events, and some I'm waiting to. I'm excited to include them in upcoming events, but I love indie horror. That's one of my favorite things about going to a Days of the Dead event. Is checking out what filmmakers are there, what their new movies are, what kind of stuff they're selling. Scream Team Releasing is a great resource for getting fun indie horror films. They distribute a lot of great stuff and give them beautiful Blu-ray and DVD releases. So absolutely love that for them. But let's talk about some of the ones that I like and some of the pros and cons. Now, if you're going to get into indie horror, you have to expect that it's not going to be like big budget Hollywood movies. A lot of it is going to be practical effects. It's going to be a little bit cheesy. Sometimes the acting is a little bit camp. But that's part of the fun of it, is just seeing people who are doing it just for the fun of it, just for the love of it. And you get some really interesting ideas and different perspectives that you don't necessarily see in mainstream Hollywood movies. So let's start with number 10. In my number 10 spot, we have Pool Party Massacre. So this is a movie that was directed by Drew Marvick, and this one is a total 80s throwback. So if you love 80s slasher films, this is such an homage to that. Now, I will say that the pacing on this one is a little tough. There are some times where it kind of drags. There are some things that could have probably been edited a little bit better, but the practical effects are fun, if not always entirely convincing. And it's just a fun premise. It's a bunch of hot people at a pool party, and they get killed off one by one. It's a lot of fun. It's got great sort of references back to the 80s slasher films. I think it's a lot of fun, and it definitely deserves to be on this list. This is one that I have shown before, and the audience, they kind of got a kick out of it. They thought it was fun. So Pool Party Massacre is in my number 10 spot. In the number 9 spot, we have She Was So Pretty by Brooklyn Ewing. Now, this one is a little bit rough. This is one that they are famous for shooting on basically a $0 budget. They just used their cell phones, whatever equipment they had around. They costumed it themselves. They propped it themselves. Anything that was practical effects, they just made out of stuff they had around their house. And it is absolutely for the love of horror. Now, I have to say that with some of the technical kind of weirdness about it, that it's not technically perfect, I think it actually adds to this kind of creepy, weird story. Now, there are some scenes with the main character, who I think her name is Veronica or Vanessa. The scenes with her friends as they're looking for her are less effective. I'm less interested in those. But the serial killer, Alfie, And when he's got her and he's got this other victim, and whenever you see him and the way that he interacts with people and like his stalking and the way that they shoot things from interesting angles, I just think it's beautiful and weird and interesting. And I think it really just is such a fascinating look at this story. And it is very dark. And that's one thing that the film got criticized for a lot, is that there is no like strong, plucky female character. These characters who are being stalked by Alfie really are just victim characters. There's not a lot of development. The thing is that it's much more of a visual experience. There's not a lot of character development for anybody. You don't really get a lot of even dialogue. There's not a ton of dialogue. A lot of it is just visual and creepy and setting up these kind of visual scenarios. And I've talked a little bit with Brooklyn, the director. She and I are friends now, so I do have to say that a lot of these people I do have even just like little parasocial relationships where maybe we're friends on Facebook, and some of them I am actually friends with, and Brooklyn is one. She's done a lot of my photography, and so on my website, if you go to the photo galleries, we always try to shoot together when I'm at Days of the Dead, and we are friends. We talk offline too, so be aware that I'm probably a little bit biased, but we've talked a little bit about the fact that there isn't that strong, like, plucky final girl type thing, and she has kind of said something along the lines of that's sometimes the way the world is. That sometimes, for women, the world is a shitty place. That sometimes they really are just the victims of awful people. And that I think, and I agree, that I think that it's okay to acknowledge that. And I think that this film is not a feel-good film. It's not going to give you that, like, survival story, that redemption story at the end. It's just not. But I think that it's an interesting way of looking at things like violence against women in our society and the sort of sensationalization.
Is that a word?
The way that we sensationalize serial killers and that they become the star of the story and we forget about the victims. I think that's very interesting. And I think that this film, in its own kind of clunky way, really plays around with that in very interesting ways. I really do like this first film. In my number 8 spot is the movie Irrational Fear. And this is one that's an interesting premise, and it plays with some interesting ideas, where it's a bunch of people who have certain phobias, and they're all kind of going off on this retreat together. And something starts happening where their phobias become not only real, but like larger than life. And it really starts affecting them, and it ends up killing them off. And so it's all about these people who are trapped in this place and being forced to face these different fears that they have, these irrational fears. And it really plays with that kind of psychological element. There are a couple of performances that are
camp as fuck.
Look at me. I'm calling these performances camp as fuck. That should tell you something. So some of the performances are a little over the top, but it's an interesting premise, this idea of the things that we fear and how those can be used to really create these scenarios of, are you going to be able to overcome it and survive, or is it going to be something that gets the better of you? So it's a lot of fun. It's kind of a quirky little one. It's got kind of an odd resolution, but I think it's worth watching. So definitely check out Irrational Fears. In my number 7 spot, this is one that I haven't shown before, but is actually going to be part of a film series that I am doing in October, November, and December. And in December, we're going to do a couple of holiday-themed movies. And we're going to pair this with Black Christmas 2019. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it here, but I talk about all 3 versions of Black Christmas, and I talk about why I am absolutely convinced that the 2019 version is the best version. But I'm going to pair that 2019 Black Christmas with this indie treasure, I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday. This is a holiday-themed horror that is directed by Mike Lombardo, and it basically has to do with this family that's in a bomb shelter after there's been some sort of nuclear fallout. And they're trying to keep their family together, they're trying to keep hope alive. The father has sort of disappeared, supplies are running low. As they go out to hunt for supplies, things are becoming much less available, things are becoming more scarce, And there's also this possibly radioactive, maybe kind of zombified Santa that seems to be trying to track them down. So it's a really interesting premise. It's very dark. It's very bleak. Certainly is not a typical happy holiday ending kind of movie, but it's a lot of fun. Mike Lombardo has put together a really fun cast. Damien Maffei, who's kind of a darling on the larger indie scene. He was in The Strangers Pray at Night, and he's been in a lot of things with Tommy Faircloth from Horse Creek Productions, who we'll talk about in a little bit. So it's just got a really fun cast. It's got a really fun kind of storyline, and it's a really dark Doomsday Christmas story. So I definitely, if you're in for a good horror that's also maybe going to tug at your heartstrings a little bit, check out I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday. In my number 6 spot is the film 1031. And this is one that I like because I love anthology horror. I love anthology horror. So anthology horror is where you have a film that kind of creates a frame story, and then you get these little individual films. Sometimes they're directed by the same person, and sometimes they're all submitted by different directors, and then there's somebody who directs the connections, the frame story around it. I love them because I love horror shorts. I think that short horror films can be so effective because that's the problem with horror, is that it's all about the build-up to that scare. And so sometimes if you're talking about a 90-minute movie, the build-up, the pacing, if they don't handle it correctly, can get a little bit draining. It can be like, oh God, okay, we're still learning about these people. And we get little bits of suspense, but if they don't handle it well, it can almost be too much to have that 90 minutes to 2 hours, whatever it is. With horror shorts, you've got 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, and it really just gives you that fast build-up and then the payoff, and then you're on to the next story. And so you get that sort of horror film experience 4 or 5 times during the whole film. So I love that. And 1031 is an indie version of an anthology horror. So I might let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see it. I'm thinking about doing a video where I list all of my favorite anthology horror films, where I can tell you about some of the best ones to check out if you're interested in anthology, or if you've never seen them and you want to find some good ones to go through, especially if you've got Shudder. But let me know down in the comments below. I love anthology, and 1031 is a lot of fun. That rhymed.
I'm a poet and I didn't even know it.
I'll show myself out. In my number 5 spot, this one is hilarious. It's a lot of fun. If you are a zombie movie fan, if you have been watching zombie movies your whole life and you're ready, you're ready for the zombie apocalypse to come because you know what to do, this is for you. And it is Max Groh's Bong of the Living Dead. And it asks the question, what happens when a bunch of stoners all hanging out in a house together, smoking weed and watching zombie movies for the last 25, 30 years, are suddenly confronted with a zombie apocalypse? What happens? Do they know what to do? They've basically been training for this their whole lives, but are they going to survive? Will they actually be able to translate those movie trivia skills into survival skills? And what role does the marijuana play in the whole thing? It's a lot of fun. It's really funny. It's got some touching moments. This is one that we showed recently, and the audience really, really responded to it well. It's a lot of fun. It's funny. It's quirky. And if you like zombie movies, this is a really great option for you from an indie director. Max Groh has something really special with this, so I really hope that people check this out. I love it. In my number 4 spot...
Alien tentacle porn!
Not exactly. So in my number 4 spot, I have Scott Shermer's Harvest Lake. And this is an interesting kind of mixture of a psychosexual drama mixed up with an alien outer space power cosmic kind of thing. So it's a little bit like Aliens and H.P. Lovecraft with a little bit of something like... What is that movie with Lynn Lowry? God damn it. mixed with a little bit of the 1975 classic Shivers with Lynn Lowry. It is weird and sexual and dramatic and strange, and you get to see some nudity. There's a little bit of tasteful nudity. And it's just a fun movie. It's this group of friends who go to this lake cabin, and things just start getting weird. And things really are just kind of like tense, and a lot of the kind of sexual dynamics between the people become more extreme, and there's a lot of weird things that are happening. And at the end, there's this like weird alien orgy kind of thing. It just really gives you this weird ending, and it's really fun. It's really interesting and fun. It's kind of a slow burn, and you'll be like, what the fuck am I watching? But you'll want to keep watching it. It's one of those how I feel about a lot of things that are sort of inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, is that as you're watching it, you're like, what the fuck am I watching? But you want to keep watching it. Like, it's so weird. And I really love that about this film. I think that it's a lot of fun. I think that some of the music and some of the backgrounds are fantastic. I think the storyline is weird and like sort of vague enough that it just leaves so much open to interpretation without just being like unclear. So I love it. I absolutely think this is great. Definitely check out Scott Shermer's Harvest Lake. In the number 3 spot, we have Justin Seaman's The Barn. I am super excited for the sequel to this to come out, because this is just a fun, playful 80s throwback romp. It's such a love letter to cheesy B slasher movies of the 80s. It's a group of kids, all the typical stereotypes of the type of kids that are like traveling. It's on Halloween. Something brings back these sort of Halloween-themed killers that start attacking and killing everyone. And it's got 80s icon Linnea Quigley. She's such an iconic scream queen. She's got a cameo role in it. It's just so fun. And it just really takes everything that you love about bad horror from the 80s and just embraces it and like loves up on it. It's just like, oh, we love you. I absolutely love it. I think it is so much fun. And there is a sequel that is coming out. I should say there's also a sequel coming out to 1031. I think that one might be out. I don't know. Both of them might be out. I haven't been to a Days of the Dead in a while. But yeah, I am super excited for both of these sequels. But especially for The Barn too. Because it was just such a fun piece. And the spirit of it, it's clearly made by people who love slasher movies. It's by somebody who clearly just loves that genre, loves that subgenre, loves that time period, and wanted to create something that's new and fresh, but that is just such an homage to that. So, absolutely in love with that. In the number 2 spot, I mentioned Tommy Faircloth and Horse Creek Productions earlier. I have shown several of his films. I'm actually going to be showing his newest film, A Nun's Curse, at an upcoming film series that I am curating at the Empire Theater here in Grand Forks. And I've shown one called Dollface, but the one that I really love that's on the top of my list, all of his films are great, but if you're only going to see one, I think you should see Family Possessions. And Family Possessions is a fun movie that is kind of a combination of a paranormal film with a slasher film. So half of it is elements of the paranormal, like The Conjuring, witchy kind of, like The Witch, those kinds of things. And then there's kind of this slasher element. It's got fantastic cameos. Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp has a role. Mark Patton from Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, has a role. And there's just such fun people. They have such spirit. It's such an interesting story. And the way they weave those two things together kind of keeps you guessing through the whole thing. Like, is this a paranormal story? Is this a slasher story? And in a way, you find out it's both. And the way that they achieve it, I think, is fantastic. So that's my favorite of the films from Horse Creek Productions. Dollface is a lot of fun. It's a more typical kind of slasher film. A Nun's Curse is a lot of fun. And I'm excited to show that up against the film Seven in November. And those films are great, but I think that my favorite of his work has got to be Family Possession. So that's in my number 2 spot. And in my number 1 spot, this is one that ever since I discovered it, I have been fascinated. And this also has a sequel that's going to be coming out hopefully soon from Troma, Dolly Deadly by Heidi Moore. This one is so kooky and fun, and the visuals are so surreal and dreamlike, and there's parts of it that you're just like, what is this about? Where you go into these like almost dream sequences and you're like, what is this telling me? And it's beautiful and ugly and scary, and it's so good. Like, it's just so weird. And it's an exploration of gender expectations. So you have this little boy, Benji, who likes playing with dolls, and he likes playing with his aunt's makeup, and you know, he just is not the typical little boy. He didn't get the rule book. Can relate. And so it's just a really fun chance to play around with those expectations and what happens when people decide that it's okay to harass and torment people because they're different, because they don't fit these sort of unwritten rules, unexpressed rules of society. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's beautiful. And what I've seen so far of what she's doing with the sequel is going to be weird and wild. And I think it's a musical. I think it's now developed into a musical. I am so excited. It's called Kill, Dolly Deadly 2. And it's going to be released through Troma, which I think is such a seal of approval for indie horror. And Dolly Deadly, I think you can watch it through the Troma streaming service. You might be able to stream it on Amazon. I don't know where else it might be available, but I think you can pick up DVD copies on Amazon. I absolutely love it. You should check it out. It is phenomenal. So my number 1, if you only watch one film on this list, that's a tough choice. It's so tough, but for me, it's Dolly Deadly by Heidi Moore. So that is the video. As we're getting into spooky season and you're looking for scary movies to watch, I hope you'll think about some of these indie gems that maybe wouldn't have crossed your path otherwise. Definitely check them out. Give them a like, give them a follow. I love the indie horror film world. I think it's just so approachable and fun, and I love it. So I hope you enjoyed these picks. If there's any indie horror films you think I missed that you'd like to hear me talk about more, definitely leave them down in the description box below. Or if there's any other ooky spooky content you'd like me to cover as we're coming up on October, definitely let me know and leave me that comment below. While you're down there, don't forget you can leave me a thumbs up or leave me a thumbs down. It's engagement either way. I will take it. The algorithm isn't a picky bitch, and guess what?
Neither am I.
While you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of all my future uploads. I really do try to put out one video a week, and sometimes, if you're really lucky, and if I'm really motivated, you might even get a bonus video. Ooh, surprising. If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box below, including a link to my website, The World of Champagne, at janessajay.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate all of you. I love spooky season, and I hope you're here with me through the whole thing, talking about creepy, ooky, spooky, good stuff. And until I see you again, bye. There's this like weird alien orgy kind of thing. Corn.
Was that really corny?
A little bit of corn.
Oh no!
Oh, I don't even remember where I was.